Special delivery for SpongeBob SquarePants.
Special delivery? Just for me? You think I'm special?
As something gets famous, it gets harder for them to ignore the popularity they're getting, and there are many ways to handle it. As SpongeBob grew from a quirky cartoon hit into a cultural phenomenon across its early run, the ways it reflected the show were rather minor. The only winks and nudges I can see to the show being self-aware about its fame, before Sponge Out of Water at least, usually came from the patchy segments, like when his room was decorated with SpongeBob merchandise, or when he called a bunch of celebrities to appear in an anniversary special. Otherwise, the show kept on keeping on for a long time, with one notable exception, the Season 3 episode, As Seen on TV. What we have here is the old school SpongeBob crew asking themselves, how would SpongeBob feel about being famous? But it's not about if he were in a show or a movie, but he had a very small role in something nobody saw, and through a series of miscommunications, thought he was a Hollywood bigshot. Only Aaron Springer, C.H. Greenblatt, and Meriwether Williams could put together such a tricky plot. They were essentially a power trio for a while. I've already talked about Greenblatt and his sense of humour, as well as Meriwether's and hers, but how do I describe Aaron Springer? Well, simply put, he was the John Swartzwelder of SpongeBob. At his best, he was everything great about the show, and at his worst, well, you know the rest. But I always had a lot of confidence in the episode when they all worked together on it, and this is one of their best collaborative efforts. I've talked about my 5 favourite Season 3 episodes, but consider this my number 6, I like it that much. And it kicks off with Mr. Krabs talking to his hardly seen pet worm, about how he's got Squidward in charge of the first Krusty Krab commercial. He's excited at first, but then enraged when he sees how much money he's spending on it. Already we're getting off to some fun discussion on the commercial business, about how weird their brands of comedy can be.
Well, what's all this useless junk? That's the useless junk for scene 28.
And a sliding scale of expensive, elaborate commercials, and basically home videos. Krabs shoos away most of the talent Squidward hired, and says all they need is themselves and SpongeBob, and later Pearl because nepotism I guess. The commercial Krabs ends up making is the textbook definition of cheap, with very flat characters, not a lot of details about the store or its products, and has no subtlety about being a cash grab. If anything, if it hadn't yet at 3:28 AM, it might have hurt the Krusty Krabs image. As it stands, the length of the commercial is probably my least favourite thing about the episode. It's a very basic joke stretched out for a minute, and I don't know why Mr. Krabs would be lenient enough to pay for that much airtime anyway. But it does provide the impetus for the plot, and shifts the focus more to SpongeBob. While only a couple frames feature him in the background, he's proud to be part of the commercial and be on TV in some way, shape or form. And his pride in it only continues to grow when he's mistaken for a cereal box by Old Man Not Jenkins, and Nat identifies him by reading his name tag. So naturally, a couple people on the street vaguely recognizing SpongeBob boost his ego, and he thinks he's a brand new star by the time he makes it to work. And his portrayal here is glorious.
Why, of course, dear sir. And next time, feel free to approach me. It must be so degrading to ask from across the room. Please, good people, no photos at work. Well, maybe just one.
Tom Kenny does a wonderful job at keeping him sounding silly, but amping up the charisma, leading to a surprising performance. And I have to give a hand to the animators for voicing this new attitude through SpongeBob's movements too. You see him make all these little faces and motions that he thinks are cool. The cherry on top, of course, being the snaps.
I'm out of here.
As the day goes on, he starts to feel he's outgrowing the Krusty Krab and quits his job, but never actually leaves. I guess because deep down, it's still so important to him. But he tries to entertain the customers rather than give them food. His singing isn't very good, but thankfully stops before things get too Atlantean. But juggling and joke-telling are such big blunders that the patties fly onto the grill and actually satisfy the customers. So he entertains them by serving them, and things are mostly back to normal. Mostly because SpongeBob thinks he's still a big shot doing this. But you know what? It's still an excellent story all around. It starts with Mr. Krabs cheaping out on what the patrons of his restaurant would want, in the advertising sense, and ends with SpongeBob learning to respond to their needs again within the restaurant itself. This sort of narrative link wasn't lost on my dad when I showed him As Seen on TV. since he has experience in advertising. So pushing aside SpongeBob's role and the satire of business, what else keeps me so amazed at this episode? The jokes. They're amazing from start to finish. While I won't list too many, since pointing out the jokes in a story this joke-driven kind of defeats the purpose of them, I'll reiterate that misunderstanding storylines don't always tickle my fancy when they go out of their way to make the characters idiots and whatnot. But here, I'm always on board with SpongeBob's naivete, because the things he's told and hears are just vague enough for him to interpret as reverence. It also helps that both him and the world around him are dimensional in this case. I can watch the episode through SpongeBob's eyes and get where he's coming from. I can watch it as an observer of his actions like Squidward or Mr. Krabs and laugh at how confusing his actions are. I've already praised the little things about the animation on SpongeBob, but it's also worth pointing out the goofier faces he makes at points. This is another one C.H. Greenblatt drew the storyboards for, but it goes without saying they were directed by Aaron Springer. And you know what? His style works when the goofiness stays understated. And as far as staging is concerned, it's SpongeBob. No matter what the story's like, you can always rely on the framing and objects to be clear and go straight to the point. Like when SpongeBob looks more cubic when being compared to a cereal box, a move that makes some sense. As seen on TV 1, Dying for Pie 0. It was also clever of them to make some later shots more dramatic, with him dimming the lights in the Striped Sweater song number and the dramatic build-up of the patties flying through the air, which both show SpongeBob projecting who he thinks he is onto the viewer. But all we really need is a funny SpongeBob.
I'm so glad I gave up fry cooking for this.
And as seen on TV, still had that in spades. This personality trait of SpongeBob's, where he lets fame get to his head, had been around before in ripped pants and squirrel jokes, but this portrayal of it would be the template for later episodes like Karate Island and Model Sponge, and for very good reason. As SpongeBob the show got more popular, it was sort of fun to see the little guy's reaction to in-universe success change to reflect this. But what you need on top of that is a good reason for this change to come around through the plot, and a fresh, exhilarating sense of humor, which keeps this particular episode so much fun to watch and talk about nearly 20 years after it first aired. Some cleverly woven messages about not letting being famous define you, and how businesses should maintain positive identities can help a little too. I'm happy to do more episode reviews like this occasionally, among my other commitments for this channel in the new decade, so think about episodes of SpongeBob or any show I've covered so far that you feel a strong personal attachment to, and you might just see it pop up here at some 3:28 AM in the near future. Goodbye for now.